So buckle up because this story is part Jerry Springer, part Judge Judy, and just a sprinkle of Home Alone chaos. My name is Harper Lane, and I was 17 years old when this entire circus kicked off. At the time I was still in high school, living with my parents, and I thought my biggest problem was whether my prom dress would fit after I had eaten Taco Bell 3 nights in a row. But apparently the universe had other plans for me, because that was when my parents Thomas and Denise managed to lose $5,000 in a poker game. Not because we were broke or desperate, not because the electricity was about to be shut off, but simply because they thought they could win big. My parents were the kind of people who watched casino heist movies like Ocean's 11 and thought, we could do that. Spoiler, they could not do that. They lost and they lost fast. And instead of taking responsibility for their own mess, they turned their eyes on me like I was some kind of human credit card. My dad actually looked me dead in the face and said, well, Harper, you do not have a job so you can work it off for us. My mom chimed in immediately, smiling like she had just solved world hunger and said, think of it as practice for when you are a mom someday. I wanted to laugh in her face, but all that came out was disbelief. Practice for motherhood? I could not even keep a cactus alive. The idea of being handed children like some free trial was insane, but they were serious. Their genius plan was that I would babysit. Not just for anyone, but for the exact man they owed the money to, Mr. Walker. Now let me paint this man for you. He was around 45 years old, divorced, perpetually grumpy, and always in a faded trucker hat that literally said, I hunt elk because punching people is illegal. He looked like the kind of man who thought Mountain Dew counted as a vegetable. Mr. Walker had 2 children, Brittney who was 9 and Eli who was 6. On paper, babysitting 2 kids should not have been a nightmare. In reality, these 2 were like Walmart-gremlin versions of Bonnie and Clyde. They were tiny chaos machines with no off switch. Eli once tried to flush an iPad down the toilet because, as he explained with complete confidence, it had bad vibes. Brittney was no better. She poured maple syrup into my backpack because it was funny. Funny to her, maybe. To me it was sticky hell. Babysitting them was less childcare and more survival training. I would walk in the door, and I could already hear my sanity unraveling like a ball of yarn. But here is the thing. I had always been the one who helped my parents. I always put my own life on pause when they needed something because that was the role I had fallen into. So part of me thought, fine, I will do it. I will be the good daughter, and help them pay off this debt they should never have had in the first place. But I underestimated just how much of a nightmare this situation would become. One Friday, Brittney and Eli decided to have what they proudly called an Oreo party. That meant they locked me out of the house, cranked up the television, and started smashing Oreos into the carpet like it was some kind of ritual. I was outside pounding on the door like a maniac while they screamed, "No rules!" at the top of their lungs from inside. Eventually, I had to crawl through the doggy door just to get in, and when I finally did, I found them tackling each other WWE style on the couch while Oreo crumbs exploded across the living room like confetti. When Mr. Walker came home, I expected at least some sympathy, or maybe a shred of understanding. Instead, he smirked and said, "Guess you are not cut out for this. Your parents should have just paid me the money." That was my breaking point. Something snapped in me right then. I realized my parents had thrown me to the wolves, and Mr. Walker thought he could laugh about it. If they wanted me to handle this, fine. But I was going to handle it in my own way. I started documenting everything. Every tantrum, every meltdown, every insane thing those kids did went into a digital folder. Every time Mr. Walker came home late and refused to pay me, every text my parents sent warning me not to screw this up because we cannot afford to make him mad, I saved it all. I was not new to editing videos either. I had been making parody TikToks since I was 14. I knew how to take raw chaos and turn it into pure internet gold. So one night, while Eli was trying to suplex a couch cushion and Brittney was painting her brother's face with ketchup, I filmed it, edited it, and uploaded it to a private TikTok account. At first, I thought maybe a couple of people would laugh. But within a week, the videos went viral. I am talking millions of views, parents across the internet dragging Mr. Walker and my parents in the comments like it was amateur comedy night. Mr. Walker got nicknamed Discount Joe Exotic, while my parents were roasted as Walmart Bonnie and Clyde. The fallout was immediate. Mr. Walker was furious. He stormed into my house red-faced, yelling about reputation damage, and how I had embarrassed him publicly. My parents turned pale like they were being audited by the IRS. But the best part? His ex-wife Melissa saw the videos. And she did not just laugh. She acted. She took what I had uploaded straight to court and suddenly Mr. Walker's whole responsible father act went up in flames. Meanwhile, the neighborhood found out what my parents had done. Basically selling me into babysitting slavery to cover their gambling debt. and they became the local joke. A neighbor even said in the grocery store, "That is what happens when you gamble like teenagers in Vegas." My aunt, who was the only sane adult in my family, stepped in. She paid the $5,000 directly to Mr. Walker, then told my parents flatly that she would be docking it from their future inheritance. Watching their faces as she said that was brutal and beautiful all at once. It was justice served on a silver platter. As for me, Mr. Walker tried to salvage something from the wreckage. He actually offered to pay me real money to keep babysitting Brittney and Eli. But I looked him in the eye and said, "I have had enough of these two children, thanks. I am going to Starbucks, at least that chaos comes with free coffee." And that is exactly what I did. I got myself a job at Starbucks, and honestly it was the best choice I ever made. After the storm of chaos, viral videos, and my aunt stepping in to pay off the $5,000, I thought my life might finally calm down. Spoiler alert, it did not. The fallout of what happened was far more interesting than I could have anticipated. And the biggest surprise came in the form of a message from Melissa, Mr. Walker's ex-wife. I did not expect her to reach out to me at all. I had assumed she would be furious at the way I had aired the family's dirty laundry online. But instead she reached out with gratitude that left me completely speechless. She thanked me for what I had done, explaining that without those videos, no one would have believed her side of the story. For years she had struggled to convince anyone that Mr. Walker's perfect dad act was a facade, and suddenly, the chaos I had documented became her proof. She told me that having someone finally back her up meant the world, and I did not realize how emotional I would feel reading those words. I teared up, not going to lie. Melissa's thanks came with a ripple effect I had never expected. Through the court and visitation changes, she was able to get more time with Brittney and Eli. And the difference in the children was astonishing. Brittney's laughter was no longer tinged with a smirk that suggested plotting chaos, and Eli seemed calmer, more engaged, and genuinely happy. Observing them in those moments, I realized how much they had been caught in the middle of grown-up conflicts, and how that had shaped their behavior. It was not just a victory for Melissa. It was a real change for the children. Seeing them hug their mom without an ounce of fear or tension felt surreal. And I silently celebrated their happiness while quietly acknowledging that my small act of defiance had created a genuine impact. Meanwhile, my own parents were unraveling in ways that were both comical and frustrating. Thomas and Denise suddenly acted as if I had personally destroyed every ounce of family trust that had ever existed. They held long melodramatic speeches about how my actions had embarrassed the family, how I had humiliated them, and how nothing could ever be repaired now. Every word dripped with absurdity, given that they had lost $5,000 in a poker game, forced me into babysitting two children I had zero experience with, and somehow expected me to navigate the chaos flawlessly. It was almost poetic. They acted like my public documentation of the chaos. The thing that actually exposed the truth was a personal betrayal. Their outrage was so over the top that I could not stop myself from silently laughing. In my head I replayed the videos, the Oreo disasters, the ketchup face paintings, Eli trying to suplex furniture, Brittney's syrup sabotage, and all the moments I had endured. The irony of their indignation was like an impossible Shakespearean joke. I had been the one who finally did what they could not, what no one else had the courage to do, and they were mad at me for it. Watching them spiral while the rest of the world applauded or at least found amusement in the saga was its own form of satisfaction. Neighbors who had once whispered and gossiped about their gambling habits now shook their heads and smirked at the absurdity of my parents' continued moral outrage. Social media continued to surface clips from my original videos. Memes circulated of Discount Joe Exotic and Walmart Bonnie and Clyde, and suddenly my parents were the local joke, endlessly replayed in living rooms, offices, and group chats. I had achieved a strange kind of vindication, not that I had wanted it to be viral, but justice has a funny way of wearing a digital face sometimes. All the while, Melissa remained a steady presence of gratitude and kindness. She occasionally sent updates about Brittney and Eli, telling me small victories about how they laughed together without scheming, how they were learning to read, or how they finally went to bed without one of those epic tantrums that had plagued the house. She was careful to explain that none of it would have been possible without my recordings. They had provided the clarity the courts needed, and her children were now thriving under a more stable routine. I could not help but feel proud. Not proud in a boastful way, but proud in a quiet, validating sense that my decision to document everything, to take a stand when I could have just quietly suffered, had real consequences for real people. I had unknowingly become a catalyst for change in their lives. Despite all this, my parents refused to admit any fault. Every conversation with them became a lecture about family trust, as though losing $5,000 in a poker game was somehow less damaging than me proving to the world that they had treated me like a servant. They compared themselves to victims, acted shocked that I dared to post anything online, and constantly tried to guilt me into apologizing. Their behavior was exhausting, but by this point, I had learned the fine art of emotional detachment. I stopped engaging in arguments that were entirely performative, stopped trying to reason with people who refused to see reason, and simply let them fume. The contrast between their melodrama and the calm, almost content sense of justice I felt was stark. Every irrational rant, every angry glare, every passive-aggressive comment about ruined family trust was a reminder that their version of reality was completely detached from the consequences of their own choices. And so life moved forward in its strange, chaotic rhythm. Brittney and Eli grew happier, Melissa's visits became more frequent, and the household dynamic shifted in a way that was healthier for the children and, honestly, a lot less stressful for me. Meanwhile, my parents continued to perform the tragicomedy of offended authority, obsessed with the idea that I had ruined something intangible that, in reality, had already been irreparably damaged by their own actions. Funny, because I thought losing $5,000 in a poker game already did that. After the dust settled from the court drama and the viral chaos, life took on a rhythm that felt almost normal. I was thriving at Starbucks. Not that it was glamorous, and certainly not that it was anywhere near the chaos and drama I had endured while babysitting Brittney and Eli, but it was mine. I had coworkers my age, people who actually understood how to make small talk without trying to overthrow the world in 2 minutes. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't being locked in a cage match with gremlin children who could turn a living room into a war zone before breakfast. The smell of coffee, the soft hum of machines, the predictable clatter of cups, it was grounding in a way I hadn't realized I needed. Even better, the TikTok account that I had originally made for my private amusement? It was still blowing up. Clips of Eli attempting to lift the couch, Brittney's syrup sabotage, and the Oreo carnage were still circulating, now remixed and memified by strangers who had no idea I existed. People kept sending me DMs asking me to comment on other parenting fails, or to weigh in on ridiculous kid antics, or just to react to videos that seemed designed specifically to make adults cry. Every notification was a small thrill. I had discovered a new outlet for humor and creativity, and it was both validating and cathartic. I leaned into it with the kind of ridiculous energy that only comes from having survived real-life chaos and come out relatively unscathed. I started editing my old footage into mock movie trailers, complete with dramatic music, slow-motion shots of Eli flinging couch cushions, and suspenseful close-ups of Brittney holding a bottle of syrup like it was a weapon of mass destruction. Every edit made me laugh so hard I would sometimes cry behind the counter at Starbucks while balancing a venti latte in one hand. It was a ridiculous, wonderful escape. The wildest part of it all was Melissa's involvement. She actually started helping me brainstorm content ideas. She had a natural sense of humor about Mr. Walker's ridiculousness that was borderline legendary. It was surreal to be collaborating with her. Someone I had originally seen as part of the adults fighting over the kids equation, and now we were a creative team, dissecting parenting disasters like seasoned critics while turning them into cinematic chaos. She suggested slow-motion shots for dramatic effect, little soundtrack cues for Eli's wrestling matches, and mock award categories like most creative use of ketchup in a domestic environment. Her insight was sharp, but it was also playful, and it turned the already insane situation into pure entertainment gold. Meanwhile, Starbucks became more than just a job. It became a safe harbor. I could make mistakes without the threat of someone flinging syrup at me, or trying to flush my electronics down the toilet. I could have casual conversations with my coworkers, share laughs, and even experiment with little video projects during my breaks. Each day felt like a little victory, a reminder that I was capable of carving my own space in the world and creating joy from chaos rather than being crushed by it. Even the social media side of things started to open doors I had not anticipated. Followers began tagging me in other parenting fails, asking for commentary, and offering suggestions for edits. Some of the DMs were ridiculous, some were heartfelt, and some were downright bizarre. But all of them reminded me that what I had initially thought was a humiliating, exhausting ordeal had actually become a platform for creativity, connection, and most unexpectedly, empowerment. It was strange to see how something so chaotic and difficult could be transformed into something so positive and affirming. As I continued to balance espresso shots with editing footage, and slow mornings with viral chaos, I realized that this new chapter of my life, oddly enough, felt more stable than anything I had experienced with my parents dictating my every move. I had control, I had humor, I had community, and above all, I had the knowledge that I had turned a disaster into something that actually mattered to other people. Melissa even started helping me brainstorm, which was wild because she had a natural sense of humor about Mr. Walker's ridiculousness. Just when I thought the chaos had started to settle into a manageable rhythm, Mr. Walker decided to crank the drama back up to 11. He tried to sue me for defamation. Apparently, my little TikTok videos and edits, footage of his kids wreaking havoc and him shrugging it off, were somehow character assassination in his mind. I could not have been less intimidated, partly because I knew the truth, and partly because by this point I had developed a near superhuman ability to watch grown adults implode under the weight of their own ridiculousness. Court day arrived and the atmosphere was absurd. The judge called us to the bench, listened to the opening statements, and then asked for the evidence. I handed over my folder of videos, the Oreo carnage, the syrup sabotage, Eli attempting to suplex the couch, Brittney's dramatic escape through the doggy door. Every single moment meticulously documented. The courtroom went silent for a beat, and then the judge leaned back, chuckled, and said that he could not take this case seriously. He laughed as he scrolled through the videos on the laptop, pointing out moments that were obviously more comedic than defamatory. One clip of Eli throwing a chair in slow motion with dramatic music had the whole courtroom stifling laughter. Within 10 minutes he tossed the case out. Melissa was in the courtroom with me. Seeing her reaction was surreal. She was laughing quietly, wiping tears from her eyes as the judge tore the case apart without even a shred of mercy. Once the ruling was finalized, we walked out of the courtroom together and high-fived in the hallway like we had just won a tag team wrestling match. That moment, pure victory, pure absurdity, pure relief, felt like the culmination of every frustrating, messy, sticky moment I had endured while babysitting those two little gremlins. It was cathartic in a way that I had not anticipated, a release of all the tension that had built up over months of chaos. Meanwhile, my parents were still reeling from the embarrassment of the situation. Every time they left the house, they carried themselves with the kind of self-conscious shame that only comes from being publicly roasted online and having the neighborhood gossip mill fully fueled. I could see it in the way they avoided eye contact with neighbors, how they flinched when someone referenced Walmart Bonnie and Clyde, or the babysitter who survived Discount Joe Exotic. For months they had tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but their own actions had permanently eroded any credibility they thought they had. Watching them squirm and shuffle through public spaces with that level of discomfort was satisfying. I did not feel bad. I had long since stopped carrying the burden of protecting their fragile egos. Every time they muttered about family trust, or how I had gone too far, I reminded myself that the original problem had been their gambling habits, their reckless decision-making, and their choice to throw me into chaos to cover their mistakes. I had endured, documented, and turned it into something positive for others. They had squandered any moral high ground they thought they held, and there was nothing left for me to defend. I was free to watch their discomfort unfold from a safe distance, a spectator to the natural consequences of their own actions. The courtroom victory also had a wider ripple effect. People who had followed the TikTok saga now had legal confirmation that the videos were not just funny, but truthful, and that my documentation of the chaos was protected. I received DMs from strangers applauding my courage, parents sharing their own horror stories, and a few aspiring content creators asking for tips on turning real-life chaos into comedy gold. Even coworkers at Starbucks started teasing me about being courtroom famous, and asked to see the viral clips for a laugh between espresso shots. The absurdity of my life had somehow turned into a strange sort of professional and creative momentum. The best part was that Melissa and I continued collaborating. She had seen firsthand how the chaos had shaped the story, and she offered input on new edits, comedic timing, and ridiculous angles we could highlight. It felt like we had built this little universe together, a world in which we could take someone else's madness, frame it in absurdity, and find laughter and validation on the other side. While Mr. Walker fumed and my parents hovered in embarrassed silence, the two of us were actually creating something positive from the wreckage. By the time the day ended, I had fully realized the magnitude of what had happened. The court had vindicated me. Melissa had her voice amplified. The kids were thriving, my social media presence was growing, and I had learned that I could survive extreme chaos without losing my sanity or my sense of humor. Meanwhile, my parents continued to stumble under the weight of their own embarrassment, and I didn't feel bad. At this point, I was done protecting their feelings. After the courtroom victory, life started to settle into a rhythm that was still chaotic in its own way, but on my terms this time. The biggest turning point came when Melissa reached out with an unexpected proposition. She offered me a part-time gig helping her with creative video content. She had started a side business making funny parenting skits, product reviews, and little absurdist takes on everyday chaos, and she saw potential in the way I had turned Brittney and Eli's antics into viral comedy. She explained that I already had experience in making chaos look entertaining, and it was time to put that skill to use professionally. I laughed so hard at her pitch because honestly she wasn't wrong. It was the same energy that had carried me through Oreo carnage, syrup sabotage, and furniture suplex attempts, and now it was being redirected into something productive. I started working with Melissa while continuing my shifts at Starbucks, and for the first time, I felt like I had harnessed all the madness into something meaningful. The contrast between steaming lattes and editing, absurdly dramatic slow-motion clips of kids doing completely ridiculous things was oddly satisfying. I had found a way to turn my survival skills into creativity, to channel my patience, editing skills, and sense of humor into tangible projects that actually had an audience. Melissa's input was invaluable. She had a sharp sense for comedic timing and knew how to exaggerate situations without making them cruel. Together, we created content that was absurd, relatable, and, most importantly, hilarious. Meanwhile, Starbucks remained my grounding point. The work was predictable, social, and enjoyable, giving me a stable backdrop against the chaos of social media and editing deadlines. My coworkers became my little support system, teasing me about my viral fame, asking for sneak peeks of new edits, and laughing with me over the absurdity of it all. There was a rhythm to my life now: college classes, Starbucks, Melissa's creative projects, and hours spent editing TikToks and brainstorming new skits. It felt like I had taken all the chaos from my parents' mess and the kids' antics and distilled it into something that was both fun and meaningful. Fast forward to college, and the irony of the situation became even more apparent. I was studying marketing, a field I genuinely loved, and my viral TikToks with Melissa actually helped me land an internship. The same videos that had once been my way of surviving babysitting had become a stepping stone into a real career. My TikTok edits demonstrated my creativity, attention to detail, and ability to understand an audience, all skills that translated perfectly to marketing. Every time I walked into that internship, I thought about how absurd the path had been, from fighting over melted Oreos to being paid to create viral content. The best part, however, was how my parents continued to handle their role in the saga. They still told anyone who would listen that they taught me responsibility by making me babysit, as if forcing me into a chaotic nightmare had been some sort of life lesson. I never corrected them. I just sipped my free Starbucks drink, smiled, and silently reflected on the truth. Responsibility and petty revenge had blended perfectly into one satisfying narrative. They thought they had taught me a lesson, but I had rewritten the script entirely. Looking back on the entire ordeal, the layers of irony and justice were almost too perfect. My parents tried to manipulate me to pay off their gambling debt, and instead, I had orchestrated a public humiliation tour that exposed their recklessness and ensured that the neighborhood would never forget it. Mr. Walker lost credibility and custody battles were affected. Melissa gained confidence and the ability to be taken seriously as a parent and creative professional, and I had discovered a career path that combined creativity, humor, and audience engagement. And my parents, they remained the Walmart Bonnie and Clyde of the neighborhood, awkwardly shuffling through social interactions while their past choices echoed around them like a punchline to a joke they did not understand. I had taken their chaos, their carelessness, and their poor decisions and turned it into something that worked entirely in my favor. Revenge had been achieved at multiple levels, fully caffeinated, satisfying, and completely my own. I had survived chaos, thrived in it creatively, and emerged with a career, a sense of agency, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the scales had finally been balanced.